Suppose you desired a treat that sat on the very top of a refrigerator. Would you ask a 2-year-old to secure it for you? I highly doubt that you would. The reason is obvious. They are completely unable to accomplish this feat. To make matters worse, would you punish them for this utter inability on their part? Not unless you were mentally impaired. Such behavior on our part would be both cruel and unreasonable. This analogy is in essence the explanation that was given by a leading Christian theologian from the 4th and 5th centuries, as he asserted that it is the power of the human will that determines whether a person chooses to be morally good or not, or even to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ. The theologian alluded to was Pelagius, and he is famous for saying that a person did not need the grace of God to choose right from wrong, nor did they require it to choose to accept the gospel message and to then follow after Christ. He defended this stance by asserting that it would be unreasonable and unjust of God to expect a person to choose him if he had not given him that ability in the first place. Therefore, said Pelagius, since God expects men to choose him and to follow him, then God had to have given them the will to do so. It clearly follows, therefore, that men do not need grace to choose and to follow God. Their God-given volition is sufficient in this matter. Pelagius likened our choosing God to a sailboat journeying from point A to point B. The boat can be maneuvered by means of oars, symbolic of our will. However, if we choose to, we could take advantage of the sail, which symbolizes God's grace, and utilize it. It was not imperative, he asserted, that we use grace at all, though we could if we wanted to do so. Another church father, Augustine of Hippo, disputed this view of Pelagius. Augustine countered by saying that man was created good, and prior to his falling into sin, in the Garden of Eden, of course, could have used his will and volition to choose God and to do good. However, since his becoming reprobate, he no longer had the ability to do so without the assistance and enablement of the grace of God. The law, continued Augustine, was given to make clear to men that they could not keep it. This shows the imperative requirement of the grace of God, which will enable us to do what it is that God wills for us to do. It is a mark of abject humility when we realize this truth and align ourselves with its veracity. This divergence of opinion resulted in a major divide in the church of the day, and it also initiated a church council for the purpose of discussion about it. This council met in 418 and was called the Council of Carthage. It declared that Pelagius' position was both unorthodox and heretical, and that Augustine was basically correct. It would, however, be intellectually dishonest to portray that Augustine's position was accepted without problems. To the contrary, there were many who were not entirely satisfied with it. This is why. If, as Augustine asserted, one could not choose salvation except for grace being given them by God, did this not imply that those who did not choose to be saved were of this stance because God had not chosen to give them the grace to do so? If grace is unmerited favor, we didn't earn it nor deserve it, then God decides who gets it or who doesn't. This seemed to lead to the notion of God's election of people, quite apart from anything that they may have done. This caused a modified position to arise in the church of that day that was a hybrid of Augustine's position and that of Pelagius, and it became known as Semi-Pelagianism. Semi-Pelagianism corroborated the fact that Augustine was correct that all persons since Adam have been affected very adversely by sin. It also highlighted the error in Pelagius' thinking that persons are born into the world being morally neutral. Read Romans 5. Nonetheless, it was not true that sin prevents us from being able to do anything correctly, as Augustine was claiming. Sin does indeed hamper and weaken our will. It makes it harder to obey God, and we are less inclined to do what God wants. Apart from grace, we are disinclined to be obedient to God, but we can if we choose to. According to semi-Pelagianistic thought, grace is therefore an assistant, a helper, a prod for us to do what is possible for us to do by nature. This semi-Pelagianistic bent became the dominant theology throughout much of the church. For a century or so after the Council of Carthage in 418, it was vigorously debated, and its main tenets were rejected formally by the church. However, a vast majority of churches picked it up as a theological platform after the Synod of Orange, which met in 529. To this day, semi-Pelagianistic thinking has become the dominant viewpoint of the Roman Catholic Church, and quite a few Protestant ones also. Many churches today espouse a theology that is founded upon a semi-Pelagian understanding of the relation between grace and nature.